investigator. You could not have the publication track record. Ideally, the publication track record is consistent, that there aren't huge gaps in a person's CV. Again, are there people who get funded who have a gap, maybe because they were in a clinical practice and came back, maybe they took time out for family issues? Sure. Do people get funded? Sure they do. Is there an awareness that this happens in the real world? I think there's actually more awareness now than before. So, but as a rule, there is a consistent record of publications, ideally some first author. So what's most important here? And the easiest way I can do this is in terms of decreasing importance. So the sine qua non of biomedical research publications, original research, not review articles, ideally original research, not book chapters, but original research where you're the first author. Publications from your teammates. You're putting these people on. You're going to be paying them salary. Their publications certainly count. Unpublished data that support your hypothesis. Unpublished data where you can say, these data are the basis for our hypothesis. Based on these data, we propose the following approach. So unpublished data by you, by your team. And I hesitated to put this, but I did include it. Sometimes for a new investigator, it can make sense even to talk about your training. What do I mean by that? Easiest example to use that is not one that's directly applicable to you guys, but it makes the point. Let's say you're a radiologist who's putting in a grant that has to do with functional imaging. So would require very subspecialized training. You don't have a lot of experience. Getting back to that fact that you're a new investigator, could you talk about the training that you've gotten in functional MRI, which shows your ability to carry out the proposed research? Absolutely. Absolutely. You're a new investigator, it's appropriate. Could you talk about the training, if you're that same radiologist, the training that you got that enables you to read an X-ray? No. You're a radiologist. We assume you can read an X-ray. The extra training, I think, is very appropriate as a new investigator. Some of you are in training programs. I know, Peggy, maybe you're in a training program. Any extra training you've gotten that shows your ability to carry it out, I put it in there. I think it shows a strength. How much detail? Published studies count the most, discuss them first, and provide links to the publications, so show where they are. Unpublished studies. Here's where we get into a little bit different territory. I would provide more detail about unpublished studies, because your reviewers can't look them up, right? And then I would do something which may sound borderline crazy, but I recommend it sincerely. When you're talking about your unpublished studies, as a new investigator, it's unpublished data. I would talk about not just the strengths and the data you've gotten, but any limitations of your unpublished study. And you think, well, why am I going to do that? You're going to do that because it's science, and all science has limitations. And I think as a new investigator, by talking about the strengths of your approach, as well as some of the limitations, I think you're showing a level of sophistication that we don't often see in new applicants. And I think it's a level of scientific, intellectual honesty. So it's certainly something that I would recommend. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the NIH policy on new investigators. And I think I talked about this, but I want you to have this slide. The NIH is certainly encouraging new investigators, and I think we've covered all of these points about new investigators. Well, I've made the point that you do need some publications, and I know, again, in my neck of the woods, out in Baltimore, there is considerable pressure on our new faculty to apply for grant funding. And some of you may also be in this situation. I think it's fairly common now that people are more than encouraged, I don't know what the right word, less than required, but more than encouraged to go out there and get some funding. And you can think, well, you know, just went to this workshop, and Wendy was saying how you really need some publications, and I'm being pressured to apply, and I don't really have the publications. So here's one thing I do want you to keep in mind, and this is important because there isn't much, if any, information on the NIH website about this, so I definitely want you to make a note of it or check next to this slide. If you're in this situation where there's pressure to apply, and you feel like you're applying prematurely, there's pressure to apply, you don't really have the publications, the data, they're thin, you know you may be criticized. Here's what I want you to remember. In the review world, after you submit that grant, it's not going to be reviewed for a good 4 months, okay? And during that time, you may get additional preliminary data. You may have written up a publication that's now submitted. So here's what I want you to know. It is your right to ask to submit a supplement. And it's just the regular English word supplement, but it's a standard thing you can ask for of the NIH. And here's how you do it. After you apply for a grant, you'll always receive an electronic notification that's going to say, you know, we've received your grant. It's usually about roughly a month after you submit the grant. We've received your grant entitled such and such, and then they're going to give you a number. And you always want to know what that number is, because when you have any questions to discuss with someone, the way grants are filed at the NIH, they can't just look it up by title. It's always going to be with the number. So now you have a number assigned to your grant, and you'll learn what study section will review it and what institute will consider you for funding purposes. So you get all this information that's basically an electronic postcard. One other thing on that postcard, when they say what study section is going to review your grant, it will also give you one person's name, email address, and probably phone number. That person is called your scientific review administrator. It's a mouthful. You don't have to remember it. It's the only person whose name you're going to see. That becomes your contact, your SRO. And that's why they give you this person's email. So let's say you're in this position, you've got this extra information. You email your SRO, dear Dr. So-and-so, I submitted a grant for the October 2009 deadline, and I always put entitled such and such, grant number such and such, so I have them both there so they can be sure that's the right grant. I've now obtained some additional preliminary data and would like to submit an additional supplement. How many pages may I submit? When do you need them by? It is absolutely up to the SRO. It's idiosyncratic from one of these people to another, even whether they'll accept the supplement. Although, honestly, I don't believe I've ever heard of an SRO saying no to this request. But you keep the supplement short. Whatever answer they give you, if they say yes, you know, glad to have a supplement, and you say how many pages, oh, I don't care how many pages, I can't imagine they would say that. Keep the supplement short. It's an extra burden on all of your reviewers. When I say short, 2 to 3 pages, and not 2 to 3 pages of text. Data, you know, a graphic, a chart, something that they can instantly see, okay? So it is called a supplement. Keep it to a minimum, and they'll let you know when it's due. A supplement can really be such a powerful thing. It can be powerful because it's almost like, again, I hesitate to say psychologically, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I believe that it shows your reviewers that you've continued to work on this grant or research idea. It isn't funded yet, but you're committed to the research. You've continued to work on it. You've gotten some additional data. Here are the data. I wouldn't just submit one for the sake of submitting one, but if I were under pressure and I submitted a grant prematurely, would I try and submit a supplement? Absolutely. No question. This is absolutely your right. As a taxpaying citizen, the NIH, supported by our taxes, this is our right. The reason why this isn't given a lot of, isn't talked about a lot on the NIH website, it would be complete chaos if every investigator submitted a supplement. So, you know, I think used appropriately, it's very, very helpful. So what's the preliminary studies all about? I've used this word before, feasibility. And, you know, the NIH, I use this graphic to remind myself to say that, you know, We think of ourselves clamoring around for funding, but the NIH is also trying to get funding. They're also trying to make their case to the Congress for additional funds. You know,